Welcome back, everybody, to BBN After Dark. Another very good weekend of Bears baseball. And where else to start than once again this 16U Dalton team that continues to dominate a 18-2 record over their last 20 games, bring home another GMB championship. And this team seemingly unstoppable right now. I mean, it seems like easily the best team in the Bears at the moment. And this lineup, which, in my opinion, I would say the lineup depth was probably the weakness of this team going into the season. Obviously you got the big dogs at the top, but I think the rest of the lineup kind of forming was maybe the one question mark for this team. But that has really, obviously the pitching staff's been great, the defense has been great, but for me, that lineup depth has really been what set this team apart over the last couple weeks. And I want to go ahead and jump right into this weekend. Bernie, give me your thoughts on this Dalton squad over the course of the weekend. Really, really dominant baseball. I mean, looking at their games this weekend, didn't play anything close. And this is the highest level GMB, and they were just rolling everybody. I know me and you had a conversation, that was like, is this Dalton team really just better than everybody by 10 runs? Or, is 16U just a weak age? I think this Dalton team just is that good. But Bernie, tell me about your thoughts on this Dalton team this weekend. Another 4-0 championship win for the Dalton squad.
Yeah, like you said, we were joking about this yesterday that we were talking about maybe they're just playing not great teams, but they're playing the best teams they can play, and they just roll through every single team they play. And they've been dominant. They're dominant again this weekend. I think their closest game was like 11-3 or something like that in the championship game. Um, Pitchers staff Tyler Hall, Santi all did great. And the bats, like you said, the depth's coming alive, and top dogs like Ty and Tegan are still getting it done.
Yeah, and this team, it just seems like everybody, has been up and down very, very good. And it seems like it's a different guy every weekend, which we talk about this with some other different teams, but I feel like this team for a long time it was either Tegan or Vince, or maybe, you'd see Jack Roberts take over for a little bit, Ty Zazawaita. But it seems like right now it's been a different guy every single week. And the star of the week this week was Ben Lillard, who led the team in OPS, was top three on the team in batting average, hit a home run on the weekend, had a double as well. This guy, it just seems like, who's been one of the, I would say, boomer bust type player for this team for a long time. Lately, he's been more booming than busting. So, KJ, give me your thoughts on Ben Lillard and what he's been for this team and the monster weekend he had.
Yeah, Ben's a guy who's been a free swing student for a long time, and I think it's always been that Ben has had the power. He's had the good hard swing. He's always been a good defender, but I think the thing that's really putting him all together is he's embraced. He's gonna take some strikeouts. He's going to swing and miss a lot, but when he does make contact, it's going to be big time contact, and I think he's fully embraced that role. And he's starting to hit some bombs because of it.
Yeah, I mean, this guy turning into a superstar. And I do want to go ahead and move this into kind of more of a broad conversation about this Dalton team. And I want to start with you, Bernie. When do we start to have the conversation about the best player on this team? I think it's been widely considered for honestly, since the BBN came back, that it's just Tegan and everybody else. Other guys will show flashes. Jack Roberts had a couple MVP caliber months. Vince Dalton, obviously, is always the big power threat for this team. Even Jack Dalton at times has been the best player. But now this fall, we're looking at a full fall sample size so far where Jackson Dormeier is 150 points higher OPS than everybody else, and Ty Zazawaita's in second. So it's like, when do we start to have the conversation that maybe Jackson Dormeier and even Ty Zazawaita are true MVP caliber players? And I don't know if the tide is shifting for Dalton because Tegan's great. I think this is more a case of JD and Ty stepping up their game than Tegan stepping down his game. But Bernie, when do we start to have the conversation that Jackson Dormeier might be for real in the MVP conversation?
Yeah, like you said, Tegan's just he keeps doing Tegan things, but everyone else is kind of stepping up. JD, this is a guy I think that I know at least I've loved for a long time. I think everybody here has. He was an MVP candidate at one point, and then he had this massive leg injury or whatever. Comes back, struggled for a little bit, and just kept getting better and better. His work ethic never went down at all. He now seems like he's kind of back. to be in the MVP form, and it's been a long time coming. Right, this guy's been working hard for a very long time to get back to where he is right now, and I think this is now the time where you could say JD is back to being a legit top superstar.
Yeah, and then looking on the pitching side, a team ERA of sub-2 in their last 20 games. It's crazy. Santiago Story has the highest ERA on the team with a 2.6, and that's the highest ERA on the team in the last 20 games. It's been dominant. KJ, when you look at this pitching staff and the dominance that they've been able to have over the last 20 games, who's been the most surprising for you? Obviously, Jack Dalton is currently the ERA leader for this team, a sub-1 ERA over the last 20 games, 26 strikeouts, just 6 walks. Elijah Underwood, 1.5 ERA. Teagan, 1.7. Tyler Hall, 1.9. And then you have Santi with the 2.6. KJ, which of these pitching performances over the last 20 games really stands out to you?
Yeah, I'll go with the first name you said, Jack Dalton. This is a guy who was the ace of the Floyd team before he moved back up to play with Dalton. And, I think I was at least pretty intrigued to see how, it would translate moving up in age and, if he would start getting hit harder now that he moved back up. But, it's been like he stayed the same kind of pitcher he was. This is a guy who's been in pitching. He can throw strikes. He's got multiple pitches. He throws hard, not just hard for the 14U age, but for the 15U age and above. So, this guy's a legit pitcher, and he proves that he can play at any level.
Yeah, and kind of like you, KJ, I was just curious based on how they were going to use him because obviously this Dalton team, when they added Jack back to the roster, they didn't need another arm. They were already stacked with arms, so I wasn't sure what kind of role he would have in the pitching staff. But he's been an every weekend type pitcher for this team. You're looking at the innings pitched rankings. He's up there in the top 5 for innings pitched on this team over the last 20 games, and the way Ike likes to use his pitching staff, basically everybody kind of gets involved the same amount. He never really has a big innings pitch standout. So when you have that kind of staff mentality, it's been really, really impressive what Jack has been able to do in this entire pitching staff as a whole. And then defensively, this team has been lights out as well. So this Dalton squad, I think definitely you have to say the best team in the Bears right now. And obviously coming off a year where they were the best team in Bears history in terms of wins, had the best season in Bears history. So I think this team, I don't know if there ever was any questions if this team was as good as they were last year. I know they had a couple weekends early coming off of high school ball where they didn't quite look like themselves. But I think that's just a thing that we experience with freshmen going through their first season in high school balls. They come back a little bit not playing the brand of baseball that we want them to play. So since they've gotten rolling, this team just has not stopped. So very, very impressed by this Dalton squad. Moving on to another high school team that had a very good weekend, a 4-1 weekend for 18U Floyd. This team, since we talked about them a couple weeks ago where they're struggling a little bit, has been very, very good since then. I know I said on BBN After Dark that I felt like this team was just about to hit their stride, and it seems like they definitely have a 4-1 weekend this weekend, and over their last 20 games, just 3 losses over the last 20 games, 17-3 in that stretch. So almost right up there with Dalton. And we obviously been talking about how great this Dalton team is. 18U Floyd's been almost just as good. And the nature of the dominance has been a little bit different. Mac and Brennan, I know we kind of talk about this every week. They've been really carrying the load on the offensive side. But I think for this team, the key has just been finding ways to win games ugly. And 17-3 is not a fluke. You can't say they aren't, winning in dominant fashion when they're 17-3. So I think this team's just found a way to win games. And Bernie, I want to go ahead and start with you on this one. Other than Mac and Brendan, you're seeing this team. Really, it's been kind of different guys every weekend stepping up. A couple guys who had really nice weekends in this weekend we just had where the team went 4-1. Thought Elliott really stepped up on the offensive side. Obviously, when you're looking at this team's weekend, Brennan had the monster weekend with the 4 homers. But I thought Elliott really stepped up for this weekend. And another guy who had a nice offensive weekend was Oliver Saxon, who had an OPS over 1,100, a batting average of 400. So, Bernie, why don't you go ahead and touch on Elliott and Oliver Saxon and where you see them fitting in this offense?
Yeah. Elliott's always been a guy that, like we talk about a lot, he's always had that hard swing. But he's just had strikeout problems in the past. And he goes through these stretches sometimes where, he might go 7 for 10 with, a home run and 6 doubles, and then he might go 0 for 10 with 9 Ks. So it's just finding consistency from Elliott. I know he's one of the guys that Rob's going to rely on, to bat maybe like 5, 6, 7, the middle of the order type guy, middle to bottom at least. And then with Oliver, he's the guy that, coming off playing with my guys in the summer, that he was our leadoff hitter all year, and he was a superstar. Like I've said about a lot of these guys are on the Floyd team now, and he's been fighting for a chance to play. Either it's at bats or time in the outfield, right? He's had a lot of competition out there. It seems like that finally Oliver's starting to get back to where he was during the spring. And I think if Oliver gets a chance, he's not going to give it back very easily to whoever is waiting next.
Yeah, and that was one of the things, I was in the 18U dugout on Sunday for a couple of their games, and we were kind of, just talking in the dugout about Oliver and a couple of the guys on this team. And it's like, I feel like Oliver's one of those guys that when he gets going, I could see him really, really get catching fire. He's just one of those players that tends to kind of ride on momentum. And if he can really find that, if he can find himself confident and, feeling like he belongs on this team, I think you could see him really step up in this offense and be a key guy for this team. But KJ, I do want to ask you, going kind of more grand scheme instead of just this weekend, looking at in the last 20 games, again, they're 17-3. Here is the OPS rankings for this team in the last 20 games. Mac Floyd 1, Brendan Nixon 2, Elliot Myers 3, Fred Smith 4, Rose Selby 5, Rocky Tucker 6, Oliver Saxon 7, and Reese Payne 8. KJ, of those top 8, which of those kind of stands out to you? Maybe is surprising, or maybe just a guy you want to talk about? What do you think about how this team, the offense over the last 20 games?
Well, yeah, I think a strength of Rob has always been a guy who can get the best out of some guys, and I think a guy we thought has always had the tools to be a good hitter, but has never really put it together has been Rocky Tucker. He's always had that hard, aggressive swing. He's a guy I think who was afraid to strike out for a long time, and he's another guy who's fully embraced. Man, I'm either gonna, you know, I'm gonna go up there swinging as hard as I can, and if I strike out, I strike out. But I'm gonna give it all. And so he's finally starting to make hard contact. I know Rob's a guy who's given a lot of trust into him, and he's shown that he's willing to stick with Rocky through ups and downs. So I think Rocky is really feeding off that right now, and he's turning it all around for him offensively.
Yeah, and Bernie, talking about Rocky Tucker, obviously he's always been the guy that you could see, the cage bomb guy. Everybody kind of knows a guy who's a cage bomb guy who, when you see them in the cage, it's like, dude, this guy should be hitting 4 on our team. This guy's, super, super beast in the cage. And then in the games, they don't really provide much. And I feel like that's kind of been the story for Rocky for a long time. But so far in the last 20 games, he's always had good plate discipline. He's always had good raw power. What he hasn't has been the ability to get base hits. He's hitting 312, which is definitely, not eye-popping. But when you look at the 500 OBP and the 438 slug, I think you're seeing that when he is making contact, it's solid contact. And even when he's not making contact, he's been able to get on base a lot. So, Bernie, I know you've always kind of seen the potential in Rocky. What have you seen that's been different for him over the last 20 games here with 18U Floyd?
Yeah, seen Rocky a lot of the past couple of years. He has that elite eye. So even Rocky's not, exactly hitting for a high average, he's still getting on base at an insanely high rate. Um, at times I think his eye is almost too good, right? Because he'll take a ball that he thinks is an inch off the plate, and he gets a strike called on him, and then he only has 2 more opportunities to swing. And with someone like Rocky, you want him to have 3 great opportunities to hack. I think he's starting to do that more often. So with the hard swing, right, you combine with you getting 3 swings every at bat, you're destined to have more hits. And I think that when Rocky does make contact, like we said, it's big power, and I think that we're starting to see that this fall.
Yeah, it's been impressive, and I know Rob has been very happy with his approach as well. And before we go ahead and move on from 18 Floyd, I do want to touch on the pitching staff a little bit. We've talked before that Elliott hasn't quite been himself over the course of the fall, although he started to look better in his last couple outings. Mac has a 2.4 ERA over 22 innings, which is second on the team of any qualified pitcher. But the guy I want to talk about, and I get that he is a He's a pitcher that's only effective in very specific situations, but you can't argue with the numbers he's been putting up is Adam Tobias, who's got a 1.91 ERA over the course of the last 20 games. And obviously, this is a guy who you put in situations where you need strikes and you trust your defense, right? But as far as strike throwers go, I mean, how can you argue with Adam Tobias? He's got 11 Ks to just one walk over the last 15 innings. He's been effective. And KJ, I know you had him on your BWL team and you pitched him a couple times. What is it about Adam Tobias? Obviously, I think he's developed a little bit of an off-speed pitch that he's been able to throw to keep hitters off his fastball, but just been getting it done on the pitching side. What are your thoughts on Adam Tobias on the mound, KJ?
Yeah, he's a guy who really benefits by the good defense. That 18U Floyd team has a very underrated defense. They got some Gold Glove candidates all around the field, and I watched Adam pitch this week, and I was at that game, and obviously he was going up there and just absolutely pumping strikes. It didn't seem like he was falling behind anyone. From what I saw, he wasn't really putting any guys away with the strikeout, but he was getting soft contact. He was trusting the defense, and they were making plays behind him. So, Adam's a perfect pitcher for that team because they are so good defensively. And it just goes to show, man, no matter what the age is, if you can throw strikes, you're going to be effective.
Yeah, and when we talk about Elliott's struggles, that's kind of been what it is. It's not been able to throw as many strikes as he needs to, and kind of getting himself into hitters' counts. But, for Adam, being able to do that and just pound the zone and be a pitcher that's not going to lose the game for you, it's been a nice weapon. Obviously, you have to pick your spots when you're going to use him. But, I mean, it's hard to argue with what he's been doing on the mound. Moving on to another team that had a very good weekend, 13U Floyd, 3-1 on the weekend. It feels like this team is really starting to find their identity as a squad. And before we go ahead and talk about kind of the fall in its entirety for this team, I do want to start with this weekend in specific. And a guy who we've been consistently starting to talk about recently as a guy who might be emerging into an MVP candidate for the fall, Nifri Kabarkis. He hit 818 this weekend at the plate. Not as much power as you expect from Nifri, but it's hard to argue with an 818 average. And when he hits singles, they're not bloopers. He hits them hard. KJ Nifri, a monster weekend for this team, felt like a big part of the squad success was Nifri being that kind of MVP caliber offensive weapon. What'd you think of Nifri this weekend, KJ, and his dominance at the plate?
Yeah, Nifri's been a beast. I think in the spring, he wasn't fully bought into the offensive approach of swinging for the fence and trying to pull it. And he took a lot more walks in the spring, and I really implemented it to his head in this fall. It does kind of hurt the team when Nifri walks because he is a guy who can do so much damage with the bat. So he's definitely been much more of a big time swinger, and he took a couple at bats this weekend. And I don't even know if these at bats ended in hits, but I know two at bats that come to my mind. He had a bunch of hard hit balls. I was telling everyone, man, everything he's hit the last 2 weeks has been hard. But he took two at bats where there's a 3-2 count, and the 3-2 pitch was high, and it probably was ball four, but Nifri swung and fouled it off. And that really stuck out to me because in the spring he takes that pitch and takes a walk, but in the fall he's been looking to do damage. He swung at those pitches that probably are balls that he takes in the spring and extended the at bat for another chance to do damage. So he's been a huge part of the offense in the whole fall and really the whole season.
Yeah, he really has, especially over the course of the fall. And Bernie, I want to go ahead and shift gears here to the pitching staff. I know we've been talking about this guy constantly over the last couple of weeks, but he continues to produce. This is a team that was looking for an ace going into the fall, and Cam Birnstill has really stepped up. First game Sunday this weekend, GMB going out there, putting your ace on the mound on first game Sunday, 5 innings pitched, 7 Ks, 1 walk, absolutely dominant on the mound, 0 earned runs, and took home a shutout victory to push this team further into Sunday. Bernie, what makes Cam so effective, and how does he continue to just keep doing this every single week where he's just putting this team in a great situation to win?
Yeah, first of all, Cam's a great kid. He has the right mentality to go out there and pitch the first game Sunday, right? He wants the ball in the big spots. I think it's a massive thing for Cam. But just overall, like we've said this before, like everyone saw Cam as this big power pitcher, right? He's gonna go up there, he's gonna throw hard, but he's not necessarily gonna throw strikes. And the steps that Cam's been able to take this fall, right? Now he throws strikes, and now I mean, you can almost consider him an off-speed pitcher because of how often he throws his curveball for a strike. I know I was not there this Sunday, but I've been out there for a couple of Cam's outings over the fall, and he probably throws close to 50% curveballs and 50% fastballs. Right, he still throws hard, but now he's able to throw strikes with multiple pitches, and I think that's why Cam's been so dominant this fall.
Yeah, he's been super, super effective. And again, we've been talking about it. With an arm this live, you expect him to be an off-speed pitcher or to be a fastball pitcher. So I think when teams watch Cam warm up and he's pumping these high 60s fastballs in the strike zone, it's like, okay, all right, load early, right? Get ready, gear up for the fastball. And all of a sudden you go up there and get 5 pitches and 3 of them are curveballs. It's impossible to hit a guy who's been able to be effective with both pitches, and both of them are in the strike zone. Like you said, Bernie, I expected 5 innings, 7 Ks, but I thought it would come with 5 walks. That's just the pitcher I thought he'd be. But for 7 Ks, 1 walk, where he's just pumping the zone with both pitches, it's just been really, really impressive to watch this kid work. KJ, I want to go ahead and throw this one back to you. This team starting to find some life, 7-3 in the last 10 games. Again, offense being led by Neifert Kabarkis. But looking at this OPS, so I'm going to go ahead and once again go down the kind of OPS rankings for this team over the past 10 games. Neifert Kabarkis number 1, Josh Collier number 2, Diego Buccio number 3, Avery McNicholas number 4, and Caden Inman number 5. KJ, I want to go ahead and talk about the 2 names that I think are the most surprising on this list, being Josh Collier and Avery McNicholas. These are 2 guys that we're toward, the middle to the bottom half of the lineup for the most part of the summer, but 2 guys who've been really stepping up lately. I know we talked about Josh last week, so let's go ahead and start with Avery. KJ, what have you seen from Avery over the last 10 games that has really been providing his offensive production?
Yeah, Avery's another guy who's starting to finally buy in to being a free swing hitter. I think he is a guy who was afraid to strike out, afraid to fail a little bit, and he's finally, buying into the approach of swinging for the fences. I think sometimes it would all depend off what Avery does in the first pitch. If the first pitch is strike, he's lost the at bat after that. He takes the rest of the at bat like trying to put the ball in play, and it ends up being an ugly out. And I think I saw him take a couple of bats this weekend where he swung first pitch and just had this huge swing, and he had a couple shots. I know he had a shot in the semifinal game, but he had a couple really nice hits all weekend, and he's a guy who's really starting to buy in. And I think I get another winter with him. He's going to be one of the top hitters come spring.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that one. And Bernie, I want to go ahead and throw this one to you just because kind of get an outsider's perspective for this team. As we look ahead to, only one more weekend left for the youth teams and the Bears, as we kind of look ahead to 2024 and this team's identity, I think obviously you write Neifert and Diego and ZZ kind of in that top tier of this team. But when it comes to the next 3 guys, who do you see being the big bats for this team in 2024, Bernie?
Yeah, I don't want to miss anybody here, but I think definitely the first guy is Garrett Knight. Just how quickly he's developed into a top team bat has been, great to see. I like to think Josh, who's been here for a while, could be that be like number 4 or number 5 guy on this team. He's been here for a long time. He's been bought into free swing, pitching, right? He's a big Bears guy. I think that he could finally, turn into a legit top team bat for them. And then, last spot's hard because Caden Inman, like we just said, has been having a great time recently. Avery McNicholas is having a good time recently. But if I were to pick a guy, I'm going to go on a little bit of a limb and pick Cam Birnstill, just because what this guy's going to do on the mound, I think if he has the same mindset at the plate, I think the ceiling's always been there for this guy. I think when this guy's hot, there's not a ton of guys who are, that much better than him. So I think give one more winner with him and KJ that, he'll turn into a legit, top at minimum 5 bat for this squad.
Yeah, Bernie, I think that's a great call, and I think it's very similar to the list I was going to come up with. So I 100% agree with that. And let's go ahead and move on to a team that I'll tell you what has been super sneakily under the radar, one of the hottest teams in the Bears, and it's 15U Driskell. And I'll tell you what, in their last 12 games, do you know how many games they've lost in their last 12 games, Bernie?
I'll say 2.
They've lost one game in their last 12. They are 9-1-2 in their last 12 games. This team continues to cruise. 3 straight weekends they've brought home trophies on Sunday. And I'll tell you what, man, this 15U age, I think we've kind of known for a little while that it is the deepest age in the Bears. I think that's going to be reinforced when the prospect list in November comes out, is it's going to be littered with 15U guys. But I'll tell you what, man, this team continues to just do it and get results on the field. We honestly, we're not expecting our developmental teams to win games. It's nice. Obviously, we celebrate it when it happens, but that's not their main goal. Their main goal is to develop players. But tell you what, hats off to Jeff. He's been able to develop guys for Rob's team, and every week it seems like he's losing a guy to Rob. Noah Hendricks was one of the top players for this team, gets moved up to Rob. Gunnar Wilson moved up to Rob. Several guys. Evan Wheatley's kind of been moving back and forth between all 3 teams. So Jeff is dealing with losing his best player to the top team, and he's still been able to ring out some wins. KJ, I want to get your thoughts first on just the job Jeff Driskell's doing with this team right now, and what you think of the 9-1-2 run this Driskell team's been on.
Yeah, as a player, as a former player, you want to play for a coach like Jeff. He's all in to winning. He's all in to the team. Everything he does is for the team. And as a player, you want a coach who's invested like he is. So he brings the best out of some guys, man. You really feel like he cares for you as a player. He's not just there to, you know, necessarily, get through games, just get through the time. He's there to win, and he's there for a purpose. And so I think the players, feed off that, and he wants to win just as bad as they do, and he's as competitive as they are, and he can really bring the best out of guys, which I think makes for a really good coach.
Yeah, and I think this team, when we go into the fall awards, is going to have a case for the hitting prospect of the year, the pitching prospect of the year, and we normally don't do a fielding prospect of the year, but I'll tell you what, the strength of this team for me has been their defense, a 950 team fielding percentage over the last 12 games, which for a the developmental team is really, really unheard of. Typically you've got a lot of raw guys on the developmental teams, maybe some guys who are really, kind of big hitting prospects that haven't quite been polished fielders yet. I know for me at 14U, that's kind of who is in the middle of the lineup for my developmental teams, is the big hitting prospects who are still trying to figure out how to play defense. But this team's been super sharp, and I'll tell you what, Will Diekman has definitely got an argument. If we had a fielding prospect of the fall award, I think he's definitely got a argument for that award. This team has made one outfield error in the last 12 games, and I think that's kind of been the strength of this team. The infield's been good as well. Alex Demertzes is a guy I like a lot. He's been super sharp on the infield. Jaden Coleman, obviously a guy we talk about all the time, as being super, super clean defensively. But I think this team has been really, really impressive. And Bernie, I want to go ahead and throw this one to you on the pitching side. Some really impressive names here, but a couple guys I wanted to talk about. Lucas Perry, here are his stats over the last 12 Driskell games. 22 strikeouts, just 9 walks in 15 innings, a 2.8 ERA. When we're talking about pitching prospect of the fall, I think Lucas Perry's got to be up there. Bernie, give me your thoughts on Lucas Perry and the numbers he's been able to put up recently.
Yeah, it's a guy we've talked about. I feel like, close to every week, at least the past month or so. He's just been dominant out there. I forgot what word Jeff used when he described Lucas Perry's outing this past weekend, but it was a very nice word. I know that. I forgot what it was, man. I can't think of what it was off the top of my head. But he's going up there. He's been in precision now for a long time. Trying to put some things together, and it seems like it's all come together for him right now.
Yeah, a guy who has, again, kind of like we talked with Cam, I think the big step for Lucas Perry has been being able to get ahead of hitters with his fastball, and B, the development of his off speed has been very, very impressive. Lucas has been in precision pitching for the last couple of months and really been working hard. And I'll tell you what, I do want to give a quick shout out to Elliot Myers, who's kind of been working very closely with Lucas. And I know the two of them have been developing Lucas's slider over the last 6 weeks or so. And that's been the pitch that has really been the game changer for Lucas, is that slider, him being able confident to throw in any count and put hitters away. I think that's where you've seen the big K jump for Lucas. And then the fastball control has been the big walk decrease for Lucas. So very, very impressed by Lucas Perry and this entire Driskell staff. Couple other guys I just want to mention. Alex Ruppel, guy we've talked about a lot. He's been good on the mound. Lucas Colson, a guy that I think all of us like as a prospect. He's been good on the mound as well. So very, very impressed by this team. Let's go ahead and move right along to the top 15U team, 15U Floyd. 2-1 this weekend, took care of business on Saturday, and then lost a tough one on Sunday, 8-6. And I'll tell you what, this team I thought played great all weekend. I know one of the things that I was kind of talking about the players was the mental side of playing, playing GMB. I think it's just one of those things that mentally you think it's going to be tougher, so you kind of talk yourself into a little bit of pressure. And I think that was one of the things that I was actually talking with Weston Brody, that he said he thought this team this weekend was the most confident they've been in GMB all season was this weekend. And 2-1. Listen, 2-1's very, very solid. If you go 2-1 every weekend, you're going to end up with a really nice record at the end of the season. So I'm definitely not dissing on a 2-1 weekend. But I think this team, despite going 2-1, I thought this was one of their more impressive weekends of the season. A lot of different guys stepping up. Wes Brody continues to be one of the best players on this team, and really at the high school Bears in general. But KJ, I want to go ahead and start with you talking about this team and the talent that is just up and down this lineup. Who's been really sticking out to you, and maybe a surprise, maybe a guy you expected to be this good, but nobody's really talking about enough? And it doesn't have to be a guy that performed well this weekend, just any guy on the 15 Floyd team who's been really, really kind of impressive to you lately.
Yeah, I think the only answer to this question can be Weston Brody. What he's given this team, how he's stepped up and gave them a whole nother, superstar bat. People forget that, this time last year, Weston wasn't even getting really talked about. If he was getting talked about, it was because he was a solid defender. Wasn't even a good defender, but a solid defender you could put out there. So just how much he's developed this past year, I know me and him have worked a lot in the cage, and this is a guy who has really good work ethic. He wants to be great. He's willing to do whatever it takes, and a lot of guys say that. Every guy when they come to the Bears usually says that, but he's a guy who's really bought into what we're doing and has changed his entire approach. And I think when he came here, he believed he could never be a superstar kind of player. And he's put in the work, and I think now he's getting to a point where it's hard to make an argument that this guy's a surprise to be good because he's just that good.
Yeah, 100%. And moving on to the pitching side, Bernie, this team, I think, obviously the offense is elite, and I think the statement I'm about to make may be hard to defend, but arguably this fall, the pitching has been the strength of this team. Obviously the offense is super electric, super deep, but this team, a 2.6 ERA as a squad, 113 strikeouts in 111 innings. I mean, this team really does have a strong pitching staff top to bottom. You know, Logan Eckert, 2.9 ERA in the fall. Andrew Willeret, 1.45. Noah Hendricks has been kind of the surprise, 2.9. Braden King, 2.9. Andrew Driskell, 3.8. I mean, this team has been pitching well up and down the board. And Bernie, I think the surprising guy here is Noah Hendricks. But before we talk about him, I want to get your thoughts, Bernie, on Andrew Willeret and the job he's done as really over the course of the season. It seems like he's just kind of raised the bar over and over again for his pitching. Give me your thoughts on Andrew Willeret, Bernie, on the mound.
Yeah, this was a guy, going into the year that I'm not even sure I knew he pitched, honestly. And then, early in the year, you start talking to guys about, okay, because I haven't seen Willeret pitch, in person, very often at least. I started asking guys, I'm like, okay, so what does Willeret do on the mound that makes him, this special? They're like, well, he kind of just throws strikes. Like, he doesn't really have anything special to him. And then as the year's gone on, I know that I talked to guys like Braden King or maybe Ben Combs that have said now he has a decent little off-speed pitch he can use. But he's going up there. He's just going to pound the zone. He's going to go up there. He's going to throw, probably about 70, maybe a little harder than that. He's going to pound the zone. His off-speed pitch, came a long way from where it started at the start of the season. And yeah, I think he's just a bulldog up there. Gets deep into every game he pitches.
And I'll tell you what, one thing I definitely did not expect from Andrew Willeret is the attitude he has on the mound. I'll tell you what, we were talking about with Cam about the mentality to be an ace. Tell you what, man, Willeret has it. I mean, he's a little cocky up there, He's he gives people the sword, the sword emote when he strikes them out, makes them look silly. He's kind of strutting off the mound when he has a good inning. Tell you what, he's got a little attitude, which I definitely didn't expect from Andrew Willeret on the mound. But I'll tell you what, he's got the numbers to back up the attitude for sure. Very, very impressive. But I do want to talk about Noah Hendricks, who's kind of come out of nowhere for this team. I've been talking this guy up as a prospect, just in general, but I didn't even know he pitched when I was talking about it. I was talking about him on the hitting side, on the defensive side, and I know he's been good both hitting and defensively, but the surprise has been what he's been able to do on this team on the mound. He's third on this team in innings pitched on the fall season, and when you talk about the caliber of team that's very, very impressive for a rookie to just come up and be that guy. And I know Rob, one of the things he said about him is he's never seen a pitcher keep his fastball at the bottom of the zone better than Noah Hendricks. I mean, he's just pumping knee-high fastball strikes back to back to back to back, letting the defense work, pounding the strike zone, and giving the team a chance to win. I know Rob has had nothing but good things to say about Noah Hendricks, and he's a guy who, as long as he doesn't get to 50 career plate appearances, is definitely going to be, for me, a top 10 prospect when we make our November list, because I'm very, very excited for this guy and to see how he kind of progresses over the course of the season. Okay, let's go ahead and shift gears here to a little bit of a more broad fall conversation and some guys who've been very, very impressive. And I want to go ahead and talk about a couple of 14U Floyd players who I think have had very, very good falls. And starting with a guy that we talk about a lot, just won September Rookie of the Month, Jack Kester. And I'll tell you what, the fall this guy has had, he's currently leading 14U Floyd in OPS on the fall, which when you're talking about a team at this caliber, for him to just come in and be the OPS leader is very, very impressive. Obviously, this guy, the athletic tools are there. The mentality, I think, is there. But Bernie, what do you think about Jack Kester? And where do you think you see him kind of falling in the summer, in 2024, next year? Where do you see him kind of falling on this team in terms of where he ranks as an offensive hitter? I know one of the conversations me and you had off air, at worst, where do we think Jack Kester is? I think we decided at worst, he's probably like the sixth best hitter on this team. But when we talk about at best, Bernie, where do you think this guy ends up next year in terms of the 2024 hitters rankings for this team?
Yeah, at best, I think the easy answer is he could be the best hitter. I mean, he's shown that he has the ceiling to do it so far this fall. But since Jack has joined, man, I think he's done everything right. He's fully bought in. We've talked about on the show before that it's pretty clear that the last team he played for didn't let him swing 3-0, right? Didn't let him swing as hard as he can because they're worried about other things at the plate. But Jack has fully embraced it. I see no reason why Jack Kester's not going to come in and improve on what he's already started here this fall. I think he could easily be a top hitter for that team. I think at worst, I think during this talk, I even put him higher than that for worst case scenario. I just think that's how good of a player he is.
Yeah, it's been very, very impressive to see this guy work. KJ, looking at this 14 Floyd's team, another guy that I think you can't go this fall without talking about is Lucas Wilbur, and I think he's going to have a case for fall MVP. I think arguably you could say this 14 Floyd squad has been the best youth team, and by typically the first guy you look at is the best player on the best team for MVP. Lucas Wilburn hitting .565. That leads 14U Floyd. He's got an OBP of .617. That leads 14U Floyd. And he's got 11 doubles. That leads 14U Floyd. KJ, what do you think is Lucas Wilburn's kind of MVP case? And going back to last year, KJ, when coming off of the fall season, we kind of started talking about Lucas Wilburn like he's a starter through this 14U Floyd team. But I definitely don't know if I saw this MVP caliber season coming. I don't know if you did, KJ, but what can you see that kind of change for Lucas from last year to this year? Now we're talking about him as arguably the best youth Bear player.
Yeah, in my opinion, Lucas has always been a real technical guy, and and sometimes can worry about things that just are complete nonsense. And I think lately he's kind of thrown some of that stuff out the window, and he's just, it's just been a masher, which is, kind of different from his personality. I think if you talk to him, he'll get really analytical with you. But if you watch this guy play, he plays mean, and he plays the Bear kind of way. This guy, I know in the BWL, when I was coaching him, yeah, being with him as a coach is completely different than how I perceived of him before I was coaching him. This guy, he's mean and he's competitive, which is not something I really, thought of him before. And I think that's translated to his bat. He's swinging aggressively. He's not up there just take, walks. He's not up there to do just put the ball in play and move runners. He's up there to do damage. And I think he's fully embraced that role on 14 Floyd.
Yeah, he definitely has. And I think going into next season, I think he's going to continue to be an MVP candidate in the Bears. And I think he's kind of reached that level where he is a superstar on the Bear level. So very, very impressed by what he has done. Another player who's been kind of a fall breakout here has been Harrison Blaybaum on the mound. I know we've continued to talk about him, but it's justified. And I know we did I think it was Legitometer. We did a segment a couple weeks ago where we were talking about Harrison Blaybaum's pitching, and we were talking about his ERA being the best on the team. And I know, Bernie, you said that you thought the number was about right, but you didn't know if the team ranking was about right. And I'll tell you what, Bernie, since we had that conversation, his ERA has gone down. His ERA's gotten better. He's continued to pitch better and against arguably better competition because now he's not okay, we'll send you out there, against the weaker team Saturday. He's been the Sunday guy over the last couple weeks. Bernie, in this fall, he's got 24 Ks to just 8 walks, a 3.44 ERA. Bernie, when do we start talking about Harrison Blaybaum as maybe a Cy Young candidate going forward? Give me your thoughts on Harrison Blaybaum, Bernie, and the pitching season he's put up here this fall.
Yeah, I think I started. I'll say obviously we have some good pitchers on this team, but Harrison has to be that conversation. I started saying that last week when we were at Grand Slam, and again this week when he was out there on Sunday against the team that won our GMB tournament, and I think he went 4 2/3. I think maybe 4 earned with 1 walk and 8 Ks. Like he was absolutely great up there, gave us a chance to win the game. Even when the defense was not exactly at its best, he went out there, he pitched really well. Again, same story with Harrison, right? Going to throw a fastball, it's probably slightly above average. He's going to pound the zone with it, and then his curveball he can throw, at any time, any count. Keep hitters off balance all game, and it's impressive for me to see the Harrison strikeout numbers continue to go up and up because that's not something I would have thought Harrison. I thought he would type pitcher go up there, let the defense play a little bit, but he's been up there striking a lot of guys out and keeps getting better and better every week.
Yeah, and Bertie, I know when me and you were kind of talking about it, this was probably, early September, that we were kind of talking about, okay, we need to develop another pitcher for this team. What about Harrison? I bet we could throw him out there, and he would not lose us games, and to see that kind of transformation where he's not just an innings eater. He's not just okay, we can throw him against weak teams. He's got the argument to be an ace against the tougher teams every single weekend, which is very, very impressive. I think going into 2024, when you're talking about the youth Cy Young picture, I think he's definitely going to be a guy that when we're talking about the youth Cy Young kind of preview in January, how can you not be talking about this guy as in the top 5? Top 7? I mean, he's got to be up there, right, with these guys. So very, very impressive what he's done on the mound so far this fall. So very, very impressed by that. And then another Birnstill player I wanted to talk about was Cale Taylor, who, in my opinion, started to move into that star kind of caliber of Bear player. Whereas, I think in the summer he was always kind of, a top, I don't know, 30 Bear player, a guy who's very, very good. But I think now you're kind of starting to see him kind of creep into that top 20, top 15, where you're talking about this guy's one of the best players in the Bears. And I think when you're talking about this guy, the ceiling for him, I think is very, very high. Obviously the power is there. I think the mentality is there. The work ethic is there. KJ, when you're talking about Cale Taylor, obviously he's on a team with Harrison Blaybaum, so it's going to be tough to be the best player on his own team. But when you're talking about the youth MVP picture for 2024, how do you think Cale kind of stacks up with the rest of the Bear youth teams?
Yeah, I recently have gotten to coach this guy a little bit. He's been playing some games up with me, and I never really realized how good this kid is until he started playing with me. This guy is a legit all-around player. What he can do on the mound, what he can do defensively, and what he's doing with the bat. He's not the biggest guy, but he swings big. He goes up there willing to hit. He goes up there with the mentality of, man, I'm going to swing for the fences or I'm going to strike out trying. And that's the kind of hitter I want. That's the kind of hitter I look for. And that's usually the kind of hitter that wins MVPs.
Yeah. And again, I think this guy has improved immensely defensively. He's arguably, he just won September Platinum Glove in the youth. So he's arguably one of the best defenders in the youth. And I think this guy you're going to see. I mean, I was trying to think, while you were kind of talking, KJ, I was trying to kind of think of a comparison for Cale Taylor. And I'm not sure I have a great one in terms of like his player profile. But in terms of production, I think the ceiling case might be like a Tegan Kreitler, where he's one of the best hitters on the team, one of the best fielders in the organization, and he's still kind of coming along as a pitcher, but I think you could see like the talent is there for him to be one of the best pitchers. Bernie, I'm not sure if you kind of have a better comparison for Cale, but how do you like the comparison of him in terms of production? Not necessarily the type of player they are, but the production. How do you think of that comparison to kind of Tegan Kreitler?
Yeah, I think that's obviously high praise for Cale, but I think he's definitely out with how far he's came the past year. I think he definitely has the potential to get there. I think he could even be better. But with the bat and the defense, clearly Tegan, but the mound, like you say, he's not quite there yet. But again, I talk about guys a lot with the right mentality, right? Harris had the right mentality, become a good pitcher. He told me he was going to be a good pitcher, right? Kale's that same way right now, where Cale has that bulldog, kind of Cam mentality that you want to see on the mound. To go out there and be a Sunday ace, want the ball in every big spot. And I think that's the way Cale is. Cale wants to take the big at bat in a game. Cale wants to make the big defensive play, right? And I think that it's the same with him on the mound. I think he can get there by next year. I think we can easily talk about this guy as, top 10 player or so in the Bears by this time next year.
Yeah, I think that's a great call, Bernie, and obviously a guy who has been just really, really impressive over the course of this fall, and kind of to see him elevate himself. I mean, obviously, we see it every year of guys that we talk about as prospects, and when they're rookies, and talking about kind of the potential for their careers. It's always a great feeling to see these guys start to really, live out that potential. So I think a fantastic job for Cale. But real quick to end the show here, I do want to kind of give the two of you, because obviously I feel like I spend all show kind of feeding you guys players to talk about, but I did want to kind of open the floor. KJ, if you could pick somebody, maybe not on your team, on any other team that you think for you has been kind of the most impressive player in the fall. And if you want to go ahead and think about it, and Bernie, I'm going to ask you the same question as well. I'll go ahead and go first. For me, a guy that I've just been super impressed with over the course of the fall. And I think, we've talked about this guy. We've talked about this guy a little bit. I think in the beginning of September when he was the hottest player on his team, I think we were talking about him. But for me, one of the most impressive players this fall has been Ty Zazueta. And we've said this before, but to me, one of the rarest things in baseball is a catcher who can hit. And when you look across, if you rank the top Bear hitters, there's not very many catchers in that rankings. Just because it's such a hard position to still produce offensively, because your body's getting banged up. Obviously, you're hot. In the summertime, you're dying of heat. So it's just a tough position to still produce that at the plate. And for Ty to be able to put up the offensive numbers that he has, while maintaining a very good defensive profile. For me, I think he's been one of the most impressive players to just kind of watch work. And I don't think anybody was denying he was one of the best catchers in the Bears for sure. I think he's definitely kind of proven that he's one of the best players in the Bears over the course of this fall. So very, very impressive. But KJ, again, if maybe you could pick somebody not on your team that you coach, who's a guy for you that's been one of the more impressive players to watch work in the fall? It can be a prospect, it can be, a player on another team. What do you think, KJ?
Yeah, I'll go to a Driskell guy, and I think this guy's been a big contributor to their success. And that's Lucas Colson. I know this guy spent some time on all teams at that age, but he's a guy who right when he joined, he bought into free swing, and you're starting to see that approach come out. I think he's batting close to 600 this fall. He's just been a monster. I know he's dominated on the mound for them as well. Has an under 2 ERA for them on that team, and so this guy all around has just been a superstar player for that Driskell squad. And I think like you said, Driscoll's lost one game or so of late, and this guy is a huge contributor to that success.
Yeah, a guy that, again, when that prospect list comes out in November, very interested to see where he kind of falls, because I think we're the kind of three people making the list, and I know all three of us love Lucas Colson and kind of the player he's going to become. Who it kind of reminds me of? Again, not the not the type of player, but like in terms of the hype and the work ethic and the kind of the hype going into the winter, is it kind of reminds me of Dane Pastrana, who, for all intents and purposes, he's had a nice season. I don't know if he's quite lived up to the hype that we had for Dane, but in terms of on Floyd, he's played solid. On Driskell, he's been very good. Dane's had a really nice season, and I could see Lucas Colson kind of falling into that same type of profile going into this winter. And Dane's a guy I still love a lot going into the winter, and I think Colson's going to be a guy who really jumps over the course of the winter. But Bernie, for you, a guy who, besides anybody on your team, has really been impressive for you this winter or this fall.
Yeah, I think this is a little bit more of a recent development. I'm not gonna say I'm like through the roof on this guy yet, but I want to see how the story kind of plays out. For 15U Floyd would be Wyatt Poore. Just because last Sunday he was batting leadoff, and this entire weekend in GMB he batted in the 3-hole. I know he has over 1,000 OPS this fall, so I kind of just want to follow the story a little bit. See where this goes here with him. Batting three for that elite offense.
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring that up, Bernie, because I know you are really kind of in tune of batting orders. I know you like to look at the individual game box score, and you can see the batting order. When I look at team stats, I go to the main stat screen and filter them, so I don't see batting order. So I know that's something you kind of been keeping up with. But when I showed up to 15 Floyd this weekend, I showed up to their games on Saturday, and I see Pours in the 3-hole, and I'm like, okay. I was like, interesting. So I was asking around. I was like, has he been really hot lately? And everybody's like, he's just kind of been doing his thing. He hasn't necessarily gone on a crazy streak. It's more been he's just been super, super consistent. And on a team that I would say this was, in my opinion, the best team in the Bears over the course of the summer. And I think this fall they've kind of struggled a little bit. They've obviously still been very, very good. But as they've kind of moved into a tougher schedule, obviously they're considered a high school team now. I think they struggled a little bit with inconsistencies in terms of their lineup. Ivan Saxon, who is arguably the hero of the summer for this team, he's been a little inconsistent. Ben Combs has had weekends where he's taken over and weekends where he's kind of not shown up. Weston Brody, I think it's been kind of the story of consistency for this team. And I think Wyatt Poore is kind of right there with them as just not flashy, not hitting home runs over the fence, but just putting up good at bats. And when you talk to Rob, that's all he kind of wants is good at bats. Does he know when you go up there, does he know what kind of at bat he's going to get from you? And where I don't know the answer to that question is yes for every player on this team. You've got a lot of guys on this team with high ceilings. I think Wyatt Poore is kind of that guy with a high floor that he's not going to go up there and take 3 pitches, strike 1, strike 2, strike 3, and walk back to the dugout. He's not going to chase curveballs in the dirt three straight pitches, and he's just going to be kind of that consistent guy in the middle of that lineup. So, Bernie, I think that's a great call and a guy that we definitely haven't really talked about at all fall along. So, I definitely want to keep up with that story over the course of the last, what is it, 3 more weeks for our high school teams, I believe. So over the last 3 weeks of the season, if he goes into the winter as the 3-hitter for this team, where does that kind of stack him up in like BWL, for example? How can you deny the resume for this guy going forward? So that's going to be very, very interesting. But That's going to do it for this episode of BBN After Dark. A ton to talk about on Friday as we kind of break down the last weekend of the season for the youth teams, as well as looking at kind of these storylines that have taken place over the end of September into October. So, Bernie, KJ, thank you so much for joining me here on BBN After Dark once again. Thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you all on Friday.